My name is Hannah Peacock, and I'm 34 years old. At my father's funeral, in front of 31 relatives, my mother raised her glass and toasted my sister Haley, to the only daughter who was actually there for him. She looked straight at Haley and smiled like I was invisible. 3 years I bathed him, changed his sheets at 3 a.m., and held his head while he choked on water. Haley visited exactly twice. Then Mom slid an envelope across the table. $2,000. For your trouble, she said loudly so everyone could hear. You can go now. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply placed my phone on the table, turned the volume all the way up, and hit play. Haley lunged for it, too late. My father's voice at 2:14 a.m. tore through the silent room, and that single recording destroyed everything they thought they knew about me. But before I tell you what was on that recording, you need to understand what those 3 years cost me, and what was happening inside my father's house while I slept 12 feet from his bed. Before I take you back a few months to show you exactly how we got to that table, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from right now and what time is it? I love reading every single one. Now, let me take you back. It started in a neurologist's office on the east side of Columbus. April. I was 31. The doctor's name was Dr. Nader, and he had a framed poster of the brain on his wall that I stared at while he explained what was happening inside my father's. Lewy body dementia with Parkinsonian features. Progressive. Degenerative. No cure. He used the word trajectory, like he was describing a flight path. My father sat in the exam chair in his Carhartt jacket and stared at the wall behind the doctor's head. He didn't ask any questions. My mother sat in the plastic chair beside me, arms crossed, purse on her lap, face dry. She didn't cry. She didn't reach for my father's hand. She waited until Dr. Nader stopped talking, and then she turned to me. Well, somebody has to take care of him. She didn't say, I will. She didn't say, we'll figure this out together, honey. She didn't look at the phone in her hand and call Haley. She looked at me, the daughter who lived 22 miles away, the one who was already there in the room. And she assigned it like a chore. I nodded. I don't know why. Maybe because I was a kindergarten teacher at Millbrook Elementary, and kindergarten teachers are trained to solve problems on the spot. Maybe because my father was sitting right there, 6 feet away, and I couldn't look at him and say no. Maybe because I'd been saying yes to my mother my entire life, and I didn't know how to do anything else. Within 3 weeks, I went part-time. Within 6, I'd surrendered my apartment on North High Street, the one I'd lived in for 6 years, the one with the bay window where I graded papers on Sunday mornings, and moved back into my childhood bedroom. Same twin bed, same faded horse poster on the wall, same view of the backyard fence where my father had once built me a tire swing that I rode until I was 13. My mother called it coming home. It felt like moving backward. But I'll tell you something. The first day I helped my father stand up from his recliner, the first day I crushed his evening pills and mixed them into applesauce the way the pharmacist showed me, he reached over and took my hand. He squeezed. He looked at me with eyes that were still fully his, and he said, "Thank you, sweetheart." His voice was clear, steady. I sat in my car afterward and cried for 10 minutes, not because I was sad, because I was certain I was doing the right thing. That was the last time my father held my hand. I didn't know that then. My mother never changed a sheet, never emptied a bedpan, never sat through a 2 a.m. tremor episode where my father's whole body went rigid and his jaw clenched so hard I could hear his teeth, and I had to hold his head in my lap until it passed. She cooked dinner. She answered the phone when relatives called. She organized. That was her word. She stood in the kitchen, always the kitchen, always at the counter closest to the window where she could see both the driveway and the hallway, and managed what she called the logistics. I managed the body. She had a way of making this arrangement feel noble. "You're so much better at this than I am, honey," she'd say, stirring something on the stove without turning around. "Your father trusts you. He doesn't want strangers touching him." And then, like an afterthought that wasn't an afterthought, "Haley would just fall apart if she had to do this. She's not strong like you, honey. Strong like you." She said it the way people say, "Thank you for your service," admiring from a safe distance. It sounded like a compliment. It was a lock. I never hired help because my mother made it sound like love should be enough. I never asked Haley to come because my mother said Haley was fragile. I never left because my mother said only I could do this. And I believed her, because when someone tells you every day that you're the strong one, you stop asking why you're the only one carrying anything. I built a routine. 6 a.m., medication, vitals, bathroom assistance. 7, sponge bath, fresh clothes, lotion on the dry patches behind his knees. 8, breakfast. Oatmeal with cinnamon, half a mashed banana, water through a straw held at a 45-degree angle because a steeper angle made him choke. Every 2 hours, I repositioned him to prevent bed sores. Afternoons were range of motion exercises I'd learned from a YouTube channel run by a physical therapist in Denver. Evenings were dinner, medication, teeth brushing with a suction toothbrush, and bed. Nights I slept on a pull-out couch in the room next to his, door open, phone on the nightstand, volume on full. That was my life. Every day. For 3 years. And then he started turning his face away from me. Not all at once. It crept in over weeks. Maybe 2, maybe 3 months after I moved back. When I fed him his morning oatmeal, he'd twist his head toward the wall. When I wiped his chin, his eyes would squeeze shut. When I said, "Dad, look at me," he'd stare through the window at the backyard fence like the tire swing was still there. The doctors had warned me. Personality changes, emotional withdrawal, agitation, paranoia, hallucinations. The Lewy bodies disrupt the brain's emotional processing, Dr. Nader had said. He may not recognize you. He may become frightened of you. It's the disease. I told myself it was the disease. Every time he turned away, every time he flinched when I touched his shoulder, every time he closed his eyes rather than look at me, I told myself, this is the disease taking him. This is what Lewy body does. It takes the person you love and replaces them with someone who looks the same, but lives in a different story. I learned to talk to the side of his face. I learned to narrate everything so he wouldn't flinch. "I'm lifting your arm now, Dad. Just me. Just Hannah." He never responded. I thought it was the disease. It wasn't. Haley lived in Charlotte, North Carolina. She was a real estate agent. Top of her office, from what my mother reported. She had a condo with a west-facing balcony, a golden retriever named Biscuit, and a boyfriend who took her to restaurants I'd never heard of. She was 31 years old. She visited our dying father exactly twice in 3 years. The first time, she flew in on a Thursday without telling me. My mother picked her up from John Glenn Airport, bought a bouquet of yellow tulips from the Kroger on Broad Street, and cooked pot roast. The first time she'd used the oven in weeks. I came out of my father's room at 4 p.m. after a bad afternoon. He'd aspirated on water during his 2 o'clock intake, and I'd had to use the portable suction device the hospice company had provided. My hands were still shaking when I found Haley in the living room, fresh lipstick, hair blown out, holding the tulips in the crook of her arm like a beauty queen. "Daddy," she said, leaning over him with her phone already in her other hand. "I'm so sorry I haven't been here more." She stayed 4 hours. She cried twice. Once when she hugged him and once when she took a selfie with him and noticed her eyes were already red enough to look authentic. She posted it that night with the caption, "Family time. Nothing matters more." 43 likes. 6 heart emojis in the comments. Then she went to brunch with a friend from high school named Jessica something. I went back to emptying the catheter bag. My mother stood in the kitchen doorway that evening, her spot, always her spot, and said in front of my father, "Haley came all the way from Charlotte, Gerald. That's love." The tulips sat on the dining table for 3 days. They wilted. Nobody threw them out. I did. After Haley flew back, she sent me a text message. I still have the screenshot. "Thanks for being there, sis. I know it's not easy. You're amazing." I read it 4 times. I saved it. I thought it was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in months. I was wrong about what that message was, but I wouldn't know that for a long time. 2 months after Haley's first visit, I noticed something small. My mother had always gotten to the mailbox first, by 7:30 every morning, rain or shine. I'd never thought about it. But one Saturday I was up early, before 6, because my father had a bad night with tremors, and I saw her at the mailbox in her bathrobe. She pulled out a stack of envelopes, rifled through them standing on the driveway, and tucked 2 into her robe pocket before walking back in. The rest she left on the counter, already opened. I asked about it over coffee. "What were those envelopes, Mom?" She didn't look up from the newspaper. "Junk, honey. Credit card offers. You know how they are." I didn't press it. I was too tired to press anything, but over the following weeks I noticed it more. Letters from Prudential, from Chase, from a law office on Cherry Street whose name I didn't recognize. All opened. All gone by the time I finished the morning medication round. I asked her once about my father's finances, who was paying the mortgage, who was managing the medical bills, whether his disability insurance was covering the home health supplies I was buying out of my own checking account. She set down her coffee mug with the kind of deliberate precision that told me the conversation was already over. "Don't worry about that, honey. Your father set everything up years ago. I'm handling it. Can I see the statements? Just to understand, we're family, Hannah. We don't need to audit each other." She said it the way she said everything, warm on the surface, steel underneath. And I let it go, because I was running on 4 hours of sleep, and my father needed his 8 a.m. oatmeal, and there was no room in my head for a fight I wasn't sure I had the right to start. I checked my bank account one morning on the kitchen computer while my mother was at church. $812. Part-time kindergarten pay at Millbrook was $14 an hour, 22 hours a week. $616 every 2 weeks after taxes. Gas was $40 a week. My phone bill, $65. Gloves, bed pads, suction tips, protein shakes for my father. Another $80 to $100 a month. I was bleeding money I didn't have, living in a house I didn't pay rent on, caring for a father I loved in a family I was slowly disappearing from. I had no lease, no savings, no apartment to go back to. My old landlord on North High Street had rented my unit 2 weeks after I left. My colleague at Millbrook, a woman named Jan who'd held my full-time position temporarily, was now permanent. If I left my parents' house, I had nowhere to go and nothing to go with. I didn't realize it then, but I was trapped. Not by locks or threats. By exhaustion and love and a mother who made sure I never had enough energy or information to question the arrangement. Around the same time, maybe a week after Haley's first visit, my phone started dying overnight. I'd plug it in before bed. Always the same white lightning cable, same outlet on the left side of the nightstand. I set an alarm for 5:30 a.m. for the morning medication round. Every morning. Dead. 0%. The alarm never went off because the phone was a brick. I bought a new cable from Amazon. $8. Same thing. I tried the outlet on the other side of the room. Same thing. I swapped to my mother's charger one night, the one she kept in the kitchen. Same thing. I figured the battery was going. The phone was 3 years old. I couldn't afford a new one. Part-time kindergarten pay at Millbrook was $14 an hour, 22 hours a week, And after gas and my phone bill and the incidentals my mother said the insurance didn't cover, I had nothing left. I started using the kitchen timer as my alarm instead. I stopped worrying about the phone. I shouldn't have. One afternoon, a Tuesday in October, I remember, because I'd just finished reading my father a chapter from Hondo, the Louis L'Amour paperback he'd kept on his bedside table since before I was born. He had what the doctors called a lucid interval. His hands stopped trembling. His eyes cleared. The fog that had lived behind his pupils for months lifted, and he looked at me. Not past me, not through me, at me. For the first time in months, my father saw me. "Hannah," he said. His voice was different. Steady. Present. His eyes were red but focused. "What did you mean when you wrote that?" I stopped mid-sentence in the book. "Wrote what, Dad?" He stared at me, searching, like he was trying to reconcile two things that didn't fit together. What he saw in front of him, and something else he'd been carrying. My mother appeared in the doorway. "Gerald, you need to rest, honey. Don't tire yourself out." She crossed the room in 4 steps, adjusted his blanket, and guided me out by the elbow. In the hallway, she leaned close. "He's confused again. The disease does that, honey. Don't take it personally." I nodded, but the question lodged in my chest. "What did you mean when you wrote that?" Not rambling, not a hallucination, a specific question about something specific I wrote, but I hadn't written my father anything. No letter, no card, no email, no text. I told myself he was confused. The truth is, he was the only person in that house who wasn't. Have you ever been the one doing everything for your family and still been treated like you weren't enough? Tell me in the comments. The nights got longer. Not the hours, the weight of them. 14 months into caregiving, my world had shrunk to the dimensions of my father's house. I hadn't seen a friend in 4 months. I hadn't been to a restaurant, a movie, a store that wasn't a pharmacy. My old colleague Jan sent a text once. "We miss you at Millbrook." I typed, "Miss you too," and then deleted it and put my phone down. I didn't know what to say to people who lived normal lives. One night, late November I think, because the thermostat was set to 62 and I could see my breath in the kitchen, I sat at the table at midnight, crying into a cup of Earl Grey that had gone cold 20 minutes earlier. Not sobbing, just leaking. The kind of crying that doesn't make noise because you've learned to do it quietly so you don't wake the patient. My mother came downstairs in her robe and slippers, the ones with the worn soles she'd had since I was in high school. She didn't seem surprised to see me. She filled the kettle, made a second cup. She sat across from me and put her hand over mine. "He loves you, honey," she said, her voice low, her thumb tracing small circles on the back of my hand. "He loves you so much. He just can't show it anymore. The disease took that from him." I let my shoulders drop. I needed those words like oxygen, because every morning when I fed my father and he turned away, a small voice inside me asked, "Does he even know I'm here? Does he care?" "Your sister means well," my mother continued, "but she couldn't handle this. You know how she is, honey. She'd last a week and fall apart." She squeezed my hand. "You're the strong one, Hannah. You always have been." I went to bed that night believing my father still loved me. My mother said so. She had no reason to lie. Except she had every reason, because while I slept, probably that very night, she was lifting my phone from the nightstand, unlocking the screen with the passcode I'd given her for emergencies, and typing another message to my father's flip phone. Something like, "I'm not here because I want to be. I'm here because nobody else would do it." Or, "Stop looking at me like I owe you something." And my father, in the next room, 12 feet from where I lay dreaming of being a good daughter, would read it in the morning and understand once again that his daughter hated him. But I didn't know that yet. I knew that I was broke, isolated, exhausted, and grateful that my mother had stayed up to comfort me. Haley came a second time, 14 months after the first visit. Same playbook. No warning, airport pickup, the smell of roast in the kitchen. But this time, I paid attention in a way I hadn't before. She arrived at 3 in the afternoon. My mother had vacuumed, put out the good tablecloth. I hadn't been told Haley was coming. I found out when I heard my mother's car in the garage and a voice in the kitchen I hadn't heard in over a year. Haley hugged me in the hallway. She smelled like a department store. "You look tired," she said. I couldn't tell if it was concern or observation. She went into my father's room and closed the door. I stood in the hallway holding a basket of laundry, listening. 20 minutes of her voice. Low, measured, businesslike. Nothing like the crying from her first visit. Not the voice of a daughter saying goodbye to her father. The voice of someone going through steps. My mother stood at the other end of the hallway, leaning against the wall near the kitchen, checking her watch. Not concerned. Monitoring. When Haley came out, she closed the door behind her carefully, and her face was composed. Not teary. Controlled. "What were you two talking about?" I asked. My mother answered from behind me. "Sister stuff, honey. She wanted private time with Daddy." Haley smiled at me. Tight. Small. "He seems peaceful," she said, which was a strange word for a man who couldn't control his own jaw muscles. Haley flew back to Charlotte that evening. She didn't come back. At the time, I thought, she can't handle it. The disease is too much for her. That's what my mother had always said. I didn't wonder what Haley might have been doing in that room for 20 minutes with the door closed. I didn't think about papers my father might have been too tremorous to sign without help. I didn't think about why my mother was in the hallway timing the visit instead of sitting with her dying husband. I didn't think about any of it until much later. By then, the will had already been changed. My father got worse. The tremors came more often and lasted longer. The lucid moments thinned to minutes, then seconds. Some days he couldn't swallow without coughing so hard the veins in his neck stood out. I blended everything. Meals, medication, water. I started sleeping in 30-minute intervals because the choking could come at any hour and there was no monitor, no nurse call button, no system except me. 11 days before he died, he called my name. Not a mumble. Not a reflex in his sleep. He said it clear and present, the way he used to call me in from the backyard when dinner was ready. "Hannah." I was there in seconds. He was propped on his pillows, eyes open, hands still. For a moment, he was my father again. The man who'd rebuilt a '72 Camaro engine in the garage on Beechwood Avenue and taught me to change a tire when I was 12 and driven me to my first day of college in his truck with the windows down. "I'm sorry," he said. I knelt beside the bed. I took his hand. It was warm and completely still. "You have nothing to be sorry for, Dad." He looked at me for a long beat. Then he turned his face to the wall. I held his hand for 20 minutes. He didn't squeeze back. Not once. I told myself he was apologizing for being sick, for being a burden, for the tremors and the choking and the 3 a.m. sheets. That's what I told myself. He died on a Thursday, quietly, in his sleep, the way people say they want to go, as if dying without noise means dying without pain. I was on the pull-out couch at 5:50 a.m. when something woke me. Not a sound, but the absence of one. The small rhythmic rasp of his breathing that I'd fallen asleep to every night for 3 years was gone. The room was too still. I walked in. His face was turned toward the wall, the way it had been every day for 2 years. His hands were folded on his chest. I checked his pulse, wrist, then neck, the way the hospice nurse had taught me. Nothing. I called hospice. The nurse arrived at 6:15. She confirmed it, wrote the time on a form, and pulled the sheet to his chin. I stood in the doorway between our rooms, 12 feet, and I didn't cry. I'd spent 3 years preparing for this moment, and it still felt like the floor had been removed. My mother arrived 20 minutes later, dressed, hair done, makeup on, already on the phone with Miller's funeral home. She cried in the driveway when the first neighbor came over with a casserole, and stopped crying the moment she stepped back inside and started making a list on a legal pad. Haley FaceTimed. She sobbed. I should have been there. I held the phone and said nothing. The next morning, I stripped his bed. Not because anyone asked, because after 1,000 mornings of doing it, my body couldn't stop. I pulled the fitted sheet, and when I lifted the mattress corner, the left side, nearest the wall, where his hand hung off the bed when he slept, something slid out from the gap between the mattress and the box spring. A phone. A small black Samsung flip phone. The kind my father had used for years before my mother upgraded him to a smartphone in 2018. I'd assumed it was gone. Donated, trashed, lost. But here it was, tucked flat against the box spring in a spot you'd only find if you were doing exactly what I was doing. The battery was dead. I searched the nightstand, behind a bottle of baby aspirin, a folded pamphlet from his auto shop's closing sale in 2019, and a ballpoint pen with the cap chewed, and found an old micro USB charger. I plugged the phone in and set it on the dresser. 3 hours later, the screen glowed. A small blue light. A Samsung logo I hadn't seen in years. I opened it with shaking hands. The contacts list had 3 numbers: my mother, Haley, and me. I went to voice memos. 1 recording. Timestamp, 2:14 a.m., recorded 3 weeks before he died. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the room, shaking but lucid, and he was crying. Hannah. A pause so long I thought the recording had stopped. Then a sound. Not choking, not coughing. Grief. Raw and awake. I read what you wrote. If you hate me that much, why do you even come? Another pause. Breathing. Just tell me to my face. Then, the sound of a door opening. Footsteps crossing carpet. My father went silent, mid-breath. A drawer opened, closed. The footsteps retreated. The door shut. 40 seconds of silence. Then the recording ended. I sat on the bare mattress where my father had died and played it again, and again, and again. I read what you wrote. The same words from his lucid moment months earlier. What did you mean when you wrote that? I never wrote my father anything. Not a letter, not a text, not a card, not a note on the kitchen counter. Nothing. But he believed I had. He believed it enough to cry about it at 2 a.m, alone, in the dark, into a phone he'd hidden under his mattress because it was the only thing in that house nobody controlled but him. I didn't understand it yet, but I understood this much. 31 people were going to hear that voice at his funeral. Not the version of my father that my mother had curated. The confused, medicated, deteriorating man whose words couldn't be trusted. The real one. The one who was lucid enough to cry, to ask questions, to hide a phone. I transferred the recording to my phone and charged the flip phone fully. I put it in my glove compartment. The funeral was 2 days later. A Saturday. Miller's funeral home on Broad Street, next to the Sunoco station where my father used to buy his coffee. White lilies in tall vases. A guest book nobody would sign until my mother reminded them. A photo of my father from 2015 on an easel. Smiling, holding a wrench, standing in front of a customer's Buick Regal. My mother had chosen it. She'd chosen everything. The hymns, the readings, the speakers, the seating. I wasn't consulted. 3 years of keeping this man alive, and I wasn't asked what song he would have wanted. I arrived to 31 chairs in neat rows. My mother was at the entrance in a navy dress, tissue folded between her ring finger and pinky, ready for deployment. Haley was beside her in the black dress I'd ironed the night before, the Nordstrom tag still tucked inside the collar. "There she is," my mother said, pulling me into a hug that lasted 3 seconds. Just long enough for Craig and Tyler to see. "Thank you for everything, honey." I sat in the second row. Haley sat in the first, next to my mother, next to the photo. Nobody asked me to move up. "You already know about the toast." To the only daughter who was actually there for him. "You know about the envelope. $2,000. $1.83 per day. You know about my mother's words. For your trouble. You can go now, honey." Said loudly enough for the people near the restrooms to hear. What you don't know is what happened after I pressed play. I set my phone on the table next to my father's photograph and turned the volume up. Haley saw it first. Her face went white. She lunged across the table, knocked over a glass of water, and her fingers grazed the phone case. But the recording was already playing. My father's voice filled the room. "Hannah." The pause. The crying. "I read what you wrote. If you hate me that much, why do you even come?" Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. 31 people heard a dead man cry. Then my mother spoke. Calm. Level. Immediate. "Your father was confused at the end, honey. The medication did things to his mind. He didn't know what he was saying." She didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. She had that answer loaded and ready, the way a soldier keeps a round chambered. That told me everything the recording didn't. Then I looked at Haley. Then back at my mother. What did he mean? What did I write? They both said the same thing. The same word. The same script. He was confused. I picked up my phone. I walked outside. I got in my car, opened the glove compartment, and took out my father's flip phone. I sat in the parking lot of Miller's funeral home and opened the text message thread saved under my name. I scrolled to the top. The first message was dated approximately 2 years before my father died. Sent at 11:47 p.m. "I'm only doing this because no one else will. Don't confuse this with love." I read it 3 times. Those weren't my words. I had never typed them. I had never thought them. But there they were. From my phone number, on my father's phone, in a thread that stretched down and down and down for 2 years. I kept scrolling. The messages were short, clinical, devastating. Each one written in a voice that sounded nothing like me, but came from my number. So how would my father know the difference? "Stop asking me why I come. I'm here because someone has to be. You're a burden, and you know it. Haley has a real life. I'm stuck here. Don't look at me like that. You know what this is. I pray it's fast. I changed your sheets tonight. You're welcome. Don't expect a thank you card." Every message was sent between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. Every single one. I scrolled through weeks and months of them, sometimes 2 a night, sometimes 1 every few days, sometimes a gap of a week, and then 3 in one night, like whoever was sending them was angry about something and took it out on a dying man through his daughter's phone. I started reading my father's replies. There weren't many. His fingers shook too badly to type easily, and the flip phone's tiny keypad was hard for steady hands. But the ones he managed were worse than the fake messages. "I don't understand what changed. I thought you loved me. Your mother says you're doing your best. Why do your texts say different?" That one stopped me. "Your mother says you're doing your best." He'd asked my mother about the messages. He'd told her what I was writing, and she'd said I was doing my best. The most poisonous possible answer. Not a denial. Not, "Those aren't from Hannah." Just a gentle, ambiguous, "She's doing her best, honey." Which, to a man reading nightly texts from his daughter calling him a burden, would sound like confirmation that the texts were real, but the caregiving was reluctant duty. She played both sides. She comforted me at the kitchen table with "He loves you." She comforted him with "She's doing her best." And both answers kept us exactly where she needed us. Me in the house, exhausted and grateful, and him in the bed, heartbroken and cooperative. I scrolled further. The messages landed with a different weight now that I knew about my father's replies. Every time I read one of the fakes and then found his response, a shaky, misspelled, heartbreaking attempt to understand. I felt my own hands start to shake. And then I understood the charger. The dead battery every morning. The cable wasn't broken. My phone wasn't defective. Someone had been taking it from my nightstand every night, unlocking it with the passcode I'd freely given, typing messages to my father, deleting the sent messages from my outbox, and plugging it back in. The screen time and the cellular transmission drained the battery dry by morning. My mother slept down the hall. My mother was awake at midnight, at 1 a.m., at 3 a.m. I knew this because I sometimes heard her footsteps in the hallway, and I'd assumed she was checking on my father. She wasn't checking. She was working. Every time I woke up to a dead phone, she'd already been inside it. Every time my father turned his face away while I fed him his oatmeal, the oatmeal I made fresh every morning with cinnamon and half a banana, he was turning away from the daughter he believed despised him. He was looking at someone whose words said, "You're a burden," and whose hands said, "Let me take care of you." And he couldn't reconcile the two, so he chose to believe the words, because words feel more deliberate than routine. Every time he'd asked, "What did you mean when you wrote that?" he was begging me, begging, to explain the messages. And my mother had cut him off every time before I could ask what he was talking about. Every time she'd sat at the kitchen table and told me, "He loves you so much, honey," she was lying to my face while simultaneously destroying me in his. Then I found it. 10 months before my father died. A message from Gerald's phone, one of the very few he'd sent back. His typing was shaky, letters doubled, autocorrect mangled. But the words were clear. "Then I'll leave everything to your sister. That's what you want, right?" Sent at 1:31 a.m. And from my number, 17 minutes later, at 1:48 a.m. Fine. 4 letters. 1 word. Sent from my phone while I slept 12 feet from my dying father. 1 word that told him his daughter didn't want his house, his savings, his legacy. 1 word that gave him permission to write me out of his will. And he did. Not because he wanted to. Not because he loved Haley more. Because he believed, based on 2 years of nightly evidence from his daughter's own phone number, that I didn't want any of it. I sat in that parking lot until the lot was empty and the funeral home turned off its lights. I wasn't crying. I was doing math. I was mapping every night, every dead phone, every turned face, every unanswered question, and seeing the shape of something I hadn't known I was living inside. Do you think Hannah's mother acted alone? Or did someone else know exactly what was happening? Drop your guess before I tell you what happened next. I drove back to my father's house. My mother was in the kitchen. Always the kitchen. I set the flip phone on the counter between us. "Tell me about these messages, Mom." She looked at the phone. She didn't pick it up. She didn't ask which messages or which phone. She said, "What messages, honey?" "The messages from my number to Dad, the ones I never sent." She started crying. Not gradually, instantly, like a switch. "I was trying to protect you, honey. Your father was saying terrible things about you. Terrible, horrible things. I didn't want you to hear them, so I made it look like you didn't care so he'd stop expecting things from you. I was protecting you." For about 8 seconds I almost believed her. She was that good. "If he was saying terrible things about me," I said, "why would you also send him messages making him think I hated him?" Her face changed. Half a second. The tears didn't stop, But something behind her eyes shifted. A recalculation, like a chess player seeing that her opponent moved a piece she hadn't expected. I was confused, honey. It was all so hard. When did you send the first one? I held up the phone. The first fake text, dated 6 months after his diagnosis. This one, I said. 6 months in. He was fine, Mom. He could feed himself. He could walk to the bathroom with a cane. He was reading on the porch. He was doing the crossword puzzle every morning in pen. You started this when he could understand every single word. The crying stopped, not tapered off. Stopped, like someone closing a valve. You didn't do this because you were overwhelmed, I said. You did it while he was still sharp enough to feel every word. You needed him lucid enough to believe it. She stood very still. You don't understand how hard it was for me. I was the one bathing him. I was the one suctioning his airway. I was the one sleeping 12 feet from his bed for 1,000 nights. Don't tell me about hard. She had no answer. For the first time in 34 years, my mother had nothing prepared. I picked up the flip phone. I walked toward the door. She called after me. Hannah, we're family. Don't do anything you'll regret. We're family. The phrase she used every time someone got close to a truth she wanted buried. A lock dressed up as a hug. I stopped at the door. Dad died thinking I hated him, and you made sure of it. I drove to my friend Cassie's apartment on the west side. I sat on her couch and called Uncle Craig. Did Dad change his will? A pause. The kind that carries its own answer. He did, Craig said. About 10 months ago. Left the house and the savings account to Haley. Everything. Did he say why? He said you told him you didn't want it. He showed me a text from you. On his phone. I saw your name. I saw the message. It said, fine. I never sent that text, Uncle Craig. My mother sent it from my phone while I slept. The silence lasted so long I checked to see if the call was still connected. Oh, God. His voice broke. I signed as witness, Hannah. I drove down from Michigan and sat in the attorney's office on Cherry Street and signed the new will because I thought, because Gerald showed me, because it said. He stopped. He breathed. I signed it because I thought you'd said it was fine. Did Haley know? Look, I don't want to get in the middle. Craig. He told me. After Gerald changed his will, Haley had called Craig. She'd said, in a voice Craig described as relieved, almost cheerful. Dad finally made the right decision. Hannah doesn't even want the house. She didn't say, I hope Hannah's okay. She didn't say, is Dad sure? She said it like it was finished. Done. Handled. I thought about Haley's text to me. Thanks for being there, sis. I know it's not easy. You're amazing. A text she'd sent weeks after my mother started forging messages in my name. A text so warm, so grateful, so perfectly worded that if anyone ever questioned Haley's role, she could hold it up and say, look, I always supported her. My sister didn't just benefit from the lie, she helped build it. Haley called me 3 days later. I let it ring 5 times. She was crying before I said hello. Hannah, if you tell everyone, Mom will collapse. She's 62 years old. You'll destroy her. Is that what Dad would have wanted? She used our father's name like a fire extinguisher, aimed at whatever was burning closest. She handled sending hundreds of fake texts for 2 years, I said. She seems pretty strong to me. You'll tear this family apart, Hannah. It was already torn, Haley. I just didn't know it. She tried her last card, the one she'd probably been saving. Is that what Dad would have wanted? I heard his voice. Not from the recording, from memory. The way he said my name that night, 11 days before he died. The way he said, I'm sorry. I understood now what he was apologizing for. Not for being sick. For believing them. Dad died thinking I hated him. You knew. You knew, and you let him die like that. I paused. Don't you dare use his name to protect yourself. I hung up. I opened my laptop. I pulled up my mother's Christmas card address list. She kept it in a leather binder in the hall closet, organized by zip code, and I composed an email. I sent it to 38 people. Every relative, church friend, and neighbor I could find. I attached the screenshots. Every fake text, timestamped. The battery drain data from my phone's settings. The recording. I wrote 3 paragraphs explaining what happened. No editorializing, just the facts, the dates, and the evidence. I invited anyone who wanted to hear the full story to come to Craig's house the following Saturday. 14 people came. Craig and Tyler drove down from Michigan. 3 of my father's cousins from Dayton. 2 church friends of my father's, not my mother's. A neighbor named Connie who'd lived next door for 30 years and had brought casseroles every week for the first 6 months of my father's illness. My Aunt Deb, my mother's own sister, who sat in the corner and didn't say a word for the first 20 minutes. My mother was not invited. She came anyway. She walked into Craig's living room in a gray blazer and pearl earrings, chin high, handbag on her arm, looking like she was arriving at a fundraiser. She positioned herself in front of the television and addressed 14 people like a school principal at an assembly. "I don't know what Hannah has told you," she said, "but Gerald was very sick. He was confused at the end. He didn't know what was real and what wasn't. Please don't let Hannah's grief turn this family against each other." I waited until she was finished. Then I connected my laptop to Craig's TV via the HDMI cable Tyler had set up before anyone arrived. I played the recording. My father's voice through the flat-screen speakers, clear and shaking. "If you hate me that much, why do you even come?" Nobody moved. My mother spoke first. "That proves nothing. He was medicated. He hallucinated. He said all sorts of things in those last months. You cannot take the words of a dying, confused man at face value." I clicked to the next slide. The screenshots filled the screen. Text after text after text. All from my phone number. All between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. "You're a burden and you know it. Don't confuse this with love. Haley has a real life. I'm stuck here." And at the bottom, "Fine. These messages were sent from my phone," I said, "during hours I was asleep. I never wrote a single one. Someone in that house took my phone every night while I slept and used it to convince my father that I hated him." Connie covered her mouth with both hands. Aunt Deb leaned forward in her chair. One of the cousins from Dayton, a woman named Elaine I'd met maybe 6 times, said, "Oh my God," very quietly. Craig stood up. His hands were shaking. "I need to say something. I signed Gerald's new will as witness 10 months ago. He showed me a text on his phone from Hannah's number that said fine. He told me Hannah didn't want the house. I believed him because I could see it. Her name. Her number." He turned to face my mother. "But Hannah didn't send that text. Did she, Christine?" My mother's jaw tightened. She said nothing. I clicked to the timestamps. The first fake message was sent 6 months after his diagnosis. At that point, Dad could still feed himself, still walk, still read, still do the crossword in pen. She didn't do this because he was confused. She needed him clear-headed enough to believe every word. I pulled up my phone's battery usage log, the screen on time between midnight and 4 a.m., night after night after night, on days I never once touched my phone. My mother stood up. Her chair scraped the hardwood. "This is ridiculous. I am your mother. I took care of that man." Tyler cut in from the back of the room. "Hannah took care of him. For 3 years. You organized the funeral." My mother turned on him, eyes sharp. "You stay out of this." "I did everything for this family," she said, louder, looking around the room for a single face that agreed with her. "Everything." Nobody nodded. Nobody spoke. Aunt Deb, her own sister, looked at her, and slowly shook her head. I waited until the room was completely still. 14 people, no sound except the heater clicking on in Craig's basement. Dad died at 2:14 in the morning, I said, alone inside his own head, believing his daughter hated him. I was 12 feet away. I loved him every single day I was in that house. Every bath, every pill, every 3 a.m. sheet change. And my mother made sure he never knew. I let the words settle. That's not protection, I said. That's not confusion. That's not grief. That's the cruelest thing one person can do to another. Haley was on speakerphone. Craig had called her in at the start. She hadn't said a word in 25 minutes. Craig cleared his throat. I'll be contacting the attorney tomorrow about the will. The basis for the change was fabricated. Aunt Deb stood. She looked at my mother for a long moment. Then she walked out of the room without saying goodbye. Connie followed. 2 of the cousins from Dayton stood and left. Tyler walked out last, pausing at the door to look back at me and nod once. My mother stood in Craig's living room in her gray blazer and pearl earrings. The TV behind her still showed the timestamp of the first fake message. And for the first time in my life, nobody was standing next to her. That was 3 months ago. The first week after the gathering at Craig's house, I didn't sleep well. Not because of the pull-out couch, I was on Cassie's sofa, but because I kept waking up at 2 a.m. out of habit. For 3 years, my body had been programmed to listen for choking, for a call, for the sound of a man struggling in the dark. The sounds didn't come anymore, but my body didn't know that yet. Craig's attorney, a woman named Patricia Greenwald on West Cherry Street, filed a challenge to the will based on undue influence. Fabricated evidence used to manipulate a cognitively vulnerable person's testamentary decisions. The screenshots, the battery drain logs, and the recording are all part of the filing. Patricia told me the case was strong. The text messages from your phone number are the key, she said. Your father changed his will based on what he believed was your explicit consent. That consent was forged. The legal term is undue influence through fabrication. It's not common, but it's clear. The case is still pending. I don't check on it every day. Some days I don't think about it at all. Other days I open the file on my phone and stare at the screenshot of fine until the letters blur. My mother called me twice in the weeks after. I didn't answer either time. She left one voicemail that I listened to once. Hannah, honey, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we talk? We're family. I deleted it. Haley sent a text. I didn't know it was that bad. 5 words that managed to admit guilt and deny responsibility at the same time. I didn't reply. I blocked both their numbers on a Tuesday afternoon, standing in the cereal aisle of a Kroger on Hamilton Road. It felt absurdly ordinary for something that permanent. A woman next to me was comparing oat brands. I was ending a family. 9 members of our extended family have stopped speaking to my mother. Aunt Deb, her own sister, hasn't returned her calls. The church she'd done admin work for since 2014 asked her to step back from her position after Aunt Deb told the pastor's wife what happened. Tyler texts me every few weeks. Short messages. Thinking of you. Uncle Gerald was the real deal. Let me know if you need anything. He doesn't ask questions. He just checks in. It's more than anyone in my family did for 3 years. I don't know what my mother does with her days now. I don't want to know. I found a 1-bedroom apartment on the west side of Columbus on a street called Westmont. It's small. The kitchen counter doubles as my dining table. The bedroom window faces a parking lot. The walls are thin enough to hear my neighbor's television, but it's mine. I have 1 key, and nobody else has a copy. I charge my phone on the nightstand every night, and every morning it's at 100%. I notice that every single morning. I went back to teaching kindergarten full-time at Millbrook. My principal, A woman named Mrs. Tanner, who'd held my position open longer than she needed to, hugged me on my first day back and didn't ask where I'd been. My students don't know. They just know Miss Peacock is back, and she brings animal crackers on Fridays and reads stories with different voices and never, ever checks her phone during class. One afternoon in March, a girl named Rosie drew a picture of her family with crayons. A mom in a blue dress, a dad with a red tie, a little girl with pigtails, a brown dog. Everyone smiling, everyone standing close. She held it up and said, "Miss Peacock, where's your family?" 22 5-year-olds looked at me, waiting. I looked at Rosie's drawing. The simplest version of a family, the one children make before they learn that love can be weaponized, that loyalty can be exploited, that the person who tucks you in might be the same person who poisons you in someone else's eyes. "My family is smaller than it used to be," I said, "but it's honest now." Rosie nodded, satisfied, and went back to coloring the dog. If someone in your family controlled the story about who you are, and the people who loved you believed it, I want you to know, the truth doesn't expire. It's never too late to tell it. I keep my father's old flip phone in my nightstand drawer. Not as evidence. The attorney has copies of everything. I keep it because on the nights when my apartment is too quiet and I start doing the math, how many messages, how many nights, how many mornings he turned away from me, I open it and play the recording. Not the whole thing, just the first word. "Hannah." That's his voice saying my name in the dark at 2:14 in the morning when he thought nobody was listening. He was wrong about a lot of things in those last 2 years. My mother made sure of that. But he remembered my name. He said it first. Before the crying, before the question, before the accusation. He said my name. And the way he said it didn't sound like hate. It sounded like a man who missed his daughter. The most dangerous person in your life isn't the one who hates you. It's the one who controls what the people you love believe about you. My father loved me. He died not knowing that. But I know it now. And no one will ever take that from me again.